The humid night air of Kowloon clung to the narrow streets, where neon signs buzzed and glimmered above the dim alleys. In a modest apartment on the 12th floor, Wei Ming sat at the dinner table, frowning at the flickering light above his head. The bulb sparked once more, then went out, leaving the room in a hushed shadow. His wife, Li Na, rose quietly from her chair. Her movements were graceful yet cautious, as if she feared that even the silence could shatter. She lit a small lamp and placed it near the window, casting long, fragile shadows on the wall. "We need to call an electrician," Wei Ming muttered. His voice was calm, but edged with irritation. The apartment had been their haven since leaving Guangzhou, a place where they could begin anew. But something about the persistent power failures unsettled him. That evening, he made the call. The building manager promised to send someone the next morning. Wei Ming did not think much of it. To him, it was only a faulty wire in an old apartment. To Li Na, however, the thought of a stranger stepping into their home seemed to weigh heavily. She pressed her lips together and avoided his gaze. The night grew colder as the city hummed below. Cars honked, voices rose in distant arguments, and yet within the walls of the apartment, a different kind of silence thickened. Wei Ming watched his wife for a long while. Her eyes lingered on the lamp flame as though it reminded her of something long buried. The next morning, when the knock finally came at their door, the sound echoed louder than expected. Wei Ming stood, straightened his shirt, and opened it. A man in his mid-40s stood in the corridor, carrying a worn leather tool bag. His face was weathered by years of labor, but his eyes were sharp and strangely unsettled. "I am Chan Ho," the man said softly. "The building sent me." Wei Ming stepped aside and let him in. The electrician's boots tapped against the wooden floor, steady yet hesitant. As he entered the apartment, his gaze caught Li Na by the window. And in that moment, his hands froze. The tool bag slipped slightly from his grip. His eyes widened as though he had stumbled upon a ghost he thought was long gone. Li Na's face drained of color. She held the edge of the curtain with trembling fingers. The room felt heavier, the faint hum of the city outside drowned by the quiet storm inside. Wei Ming glanced between them, confusion tightening his brow. "What is it?" he asked. Neither of them answered. Wei Ming felt the air tighten as he looked at his wife and the electrician. It was more than a glance. It was as if time itself had stopped, forcing them all into an invisible confrontation. Chan Ho was the first to recover. He cleared his throat, lowered his gaze, and placed his bag on the floor. "Where is the main switchboard?" he asked, his voice slightly strained. Wei Ming led him towards the narrow hallway, but as he turned back, he caught sight of Li Na. She was pale, gripping the window frame, her breathing shallow. Something was not right. He knew his wife well enough to sense fear when it appeared. While Chan Ho began unscrewing the switchboard, Wei Ming returned to Li Na. "Do you know him?" he asked quietly. Li Na shook her head, too quickly, her voice almost a whisper. "No, I do not." Yet the way her eyes betrayed her, darting away and refusing to settle, told Wei Ming otherwise. The sound of tools clicking against metal echoed through the apartment. Chan Ho worked methodically, yet every so often his gaze wandered back to Li Na. Not in lust, not in simple curiosity, but in recognition. Wei Ming folded his arms, leaning against the doorway. "He acts like he has seen you before," he said. Li Na forced a faint smile, though it never reached her eyes. "Perhaps I have a familiar face." But in that dimly lit corridor, Wei Ming could not shake the sense that something old and dangerous had just walked into their lives. For the next few days, Wei Ming tried to dismiss the feeling, but it lingered like smoke after a fire. Chan Ho came again, claiming the electrical system needed more than one visit. Each time, his presence unsettled the home. He spoke little to Wei Ming, but whenever Li Na entered the room, his hands slowed, his eyes lingered, and silence filled the air. One afternoon, Wei Ming returned from work earlier than expected. He found Li Na standing by the door, speaking in a low voice to Chan Ho. Her expression was tense, her body angled as though she wanted to shield herself from his presence. When she noticed Wei Ming, her lips tightened. Chan Ho muttered something, gathered his tools, and left hurriedly. "Tell me the truth," Wei Ming demanded when the door closed. "Who is he to you?" Li Na's hands trembled as she tried to busy herself with the kettle. "He is no one. Do not trouble yourself with this." But the way her voice cracked betrayed her. And deep inside, Wei Ming felt the first sharp sting of betrayal. Wei Ming began to follow Chan Ho. He waited until the electrician left the building one evening, then trailed him through the crowded night markets of Kowloon. Neon signs flickered above steamed food stalls, and voices rose in Cantonese as vendors shouted their offers. Chan Ho moved with purpose, weaving through the crowd until he reached a narrow alley behind Nathan Road. He entered a small tea house where the lights were dim and the windows fogged with smoke. Wei Ming sat outside, watching through the glass. Inside, Chan Ho met with two men. They spoke in hushed tones, their faces serious, their hands moving across the table as though discussing debts or secrets. Wei Ming could not hear their words, but he saw the name Li Na pass across Chan Ho's lips. The men nodded grimly. A chill ran through him. His wife's name, spoken in the secrecy of smoke and shadow. That night, Wei Ming confronted Li Na once more. "Why does he know your name?" Li Na froze. The teacup slipped from her hand and shattered against the floor. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Finally, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "Because I was not the woman you thought I was before we married." Wei Ming's chest tightened. "Explain." Li Na turned away, staring out into the night beyond the window. "There are things I left behind when I came to Hong Kong. Things I prayed would never return. Chan Ho, he was part of that past." Her words hung in the air, vague and unfinished, yet heavy with unspoken truth. Wei Ming realized he was standing at the edge of a story he had never been told. The following days brought no peace. Wei Ming could not concentrate at work. Every sound, every flicker of light, reminded him of Chan Ho's eyes fixed upon Li Na. At night, he pressed her for more, but she remained silent, refusing to give him the full truth. "It is dangerous to know," she said once, her eyes brimming with fear. Wei Ming began piecing fragments together. A woman with a hidden past. A man who carried recognition in his eyes. Meetings in smoke-filled tea houses. One evening, Wei Ming returned home to find a letter slipped under their door. No name, no signature. Just a line written in careful strokes. "She is not who you think she is." The letter gnawed at Wei Ming's thoughts. He kept it hidden from Li Na, slipping it into his jacket pocket. That night, when the apartment fell silent, he could hear his wife's breathing restless beside him. The following day, Chan Ho returned once more. This time, Wei Ming refused to leave him alone. He stood in the living room, arms folded, watching every movement. Chan Ho glanced at Li Na, then back at Wei Ming. His expression hardened. "Some truths cannot be buried," he muttered under his breath. Wei Ming stepped closer. "What do you mean?" But Chan Ho did not answer. Instead, he packed his tools and left swiftly, leaving the room heavy with unspoken words. Li Na collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. She whispered to herself, "It is happening again." Wei Ming demanded answers. Li Na finally spoke, her voice breaking with every word. "Years ago, before I met you, I was caught in a web I could not escape. Chan Ho knew me then. He knows secrets that could destroy everything we have built." Her confession was incomplete, yet enough to wound. Wei Ming's heart pounded with anger and confusion. Was his marriage built upon lies? The days grew darker. Rumors whispered through the building corridors. Neighbors glanced too long, and in every shadowed corner of Kowloon, Wei Ming felt eyes upon them. Chan Ho had not finished with them. Wei Ming finally decided to act. He followed Chan Ho again, this time inside the tea house. He approached the table where Chan Ho sat, his fists clenched. "You will tell me everything now," he demanded. The men at the table stiffened, but Chan Ho gestured for them to leave. When the smoke cleared, only the two of them remained. "Your wife was once part of something you cannot imagine," Chan Ho said calmly. "She tried to run from it, but the past has long arms. If you stay blind, it will destroy you." Wei Ming's voice shook with fury. What did she do? Chan Ho leaned closer, his eyes dark. Ask her. But remember, once you know, there is no turning back. That night, Wei Ming confronted Li Na one final time. The rain beat hard against the apartment windows, lightning flashing over Victoria Harbor. I went to him, Wei Ming said. He told me you are hiding a past that will ruin us. Tell me what it is. Li Na stood in the center of the room, trembling. Her voice was barely a whisper. Before I met you, I was not Li Na. I lived under another name. I was bound to men who traded in shadows. Chan Ho was part of that world. He recognized me because he never left it, and now they have found me again. Wei Ming felt the walls of his world collapse. The woman he loved, the life he believed in, was built upon a secret identity, a hidden history. Outside, thunder roared through the city. Inside, silence stretched between them, heavy and irreversible.